In Nazi Germany in the 1930s, a secret plan was hatched to create a master race of blonde-haired, blue-eyed children. While war raged and millions were murdered, these elite children were being bred to populate the Reich that would rule for 1,000 years.
Did they want me as a child? Or just did they want somebody as an ideological person for the system?
The project was called Lebensborn and was the brainchild of SS chief Heinrich Himmler. He said, "Should we succeed in establishing this Nordic race, and from this seedbed produce a race of 200 million, then the world will belong to us."
It gives the date of my first birthday from your godfather, H. Himmler, one of the worst criminals in Germany.
For the Lebensborn children, there would be a tragic outcome.
Wo komme ich her? Wer waren meine Eltern? Wer war mein Vater, meine Mutter?
70 years after World War II began, this film reveals what has become of the children who were born to be the master race. After a life of lies and deception, Guntram Weber finally discovered that he was a Lebensborn child and the illegitimate son of a leading SS officer. These shocking revelations have led him to retrace his father's footsteps of the autumn of 1939 in an attempt to understand his own past.
He crossed into Poland carrying his gun and carrying lists of people he was going to arrest and kill. And he knew it. He was going to do it, and he wanted to do it.
One stop on Guntram's journey will be to the home in Poland where he spent his early childhood. But this was no ordinary upbringing, with a mother, father, brothers and sisters.
I spent my earliest 15 months here, and I know next to nothing about it. There are lots of secrets connected with that, and most of them are unpleasant. This is strange, though. The floor looks, I don't know, familiar.
Guntram's first home was one of over 30, built across the German Empire by Heinrich Himmler from 1935 onwards. Their hidden purpose: to nurse a special class of illegitimate children capable of becoming the new master race. This project Himmler called Lebensborn, or Fountain of Life. Like Guntram Weber, Gisela Heidenreich was brought up in a Lebensborn home.
Himmler first said, we have to avoid abortions because too much of this precious German blood is getting lost. Then he said, we make an institution called Lebensborn to help women who are pregnant. But, and now here's the but, only to women of good blood. This was what Lebensborn actually was. They accepted only women fitting a racial correct type.
Frau Weber 1C.
Da wurde doch vom Staat verlangt, dass da keine jüdischen Vorfahren waren, dass es wurde, ich weiß nicht, bis ins wievielte Glied zurückverfolgt wurde, ob da keine Fremdeinwirkung war.
Frau Weber, Haarfarbe P.
Gesunde Frauen, die dann auch gesunde Kinder, normale, möchte ich sagen, so, nicht? Das war Voraussetzung.
Every last detail of the Lebensborn project was overseen by Himmler's watchful, fanatical eye. Himmler had rapidly risen to become head of the SS and the Gestapo. Born into a middle-class Catholic family, He became a chicken farmer, with a particular obsession for the breeding of genetically pure white hens. It was only natural for Hitler to entrust him with the Nazis' program to create a new master race. But who would be the sexual engine behind this patriotic procreation? Himmler's very own SS. Hitler said, "I do not doubt within 100 years all the German elite will be a product of the SS." They became simultaneously an instrument of terror and the genetic seed for the so-called Aryan race. Together with their specially selected blonde-haired, blue-eyed wives, they were encouraged to have large families. But Himmler soon realized that the strictures of married life slowed up the breeding process. So he actively encouraged his men to extend their carnal duties beyond the marital bed, with Lebensborn on hand for the new single mothers and their illegitimate children. Himmler said, "I have systematically defied existing laws and explained to my men that children are always a blessing, legitimate or not. Now my men tell me with shining eyes that they have just had an illegitimate child. The girls regard it as an honor, not a disgrace."
They had, like never before in their life, they had an importance which they had not had before. You were selected to be somebody who will have a child, the child will be an Aryan child. This child will be part of the so-called master race. So you are important yourself. They had evenings with music and dances, but also with training of Nazi ideology. I had contact with women who said it was the best time of their life. They had a nice staff, everything was okay, and they felt like, you are a sister of mine, we have the same ideology.
For the Lebensborn children themselves, their daily routines were tailored to serve the Reich and prepare them for their destiny.
Aller Gewalt praktisch, das war alles unter Zwang. Ne? Essen, Trinken, Schlafen unter Zwang. Ne? Und alles krachen und biegen und brechen und das Menschliche ist immer nur auf der Strecke geblieben. Ne? Wenn wir keine Angehörigen haben, dann ist ja nur eins übrig, das ist der Staat, das Volk. Ne? Und ich heiße ja auch Volk, Volk, ne? Vom Volk. Ich gehöre allen, ne? Oder soll für alle da sein. Ne?
Imagine 30 babies in one room where the nurses are instructed not to answer signals from the babies. As a baby, you would utter certain desires, the desire to be fed, the desire to be cleaned, the desire for warmth, for cuddling, for whatever. Your desires would not be answered. And that was program. It was not just that they, forgot. It was a program to break your will. Once you've broken a person's will, you can install your own order.
In Lebensborn homes, fathers remained anonymous. The Reich was the authority. Himmler himself even became godfather to a carefully selected few. Guntram Weber's mother refused to reveal his father's identity. But as he grew up in post-war Germany, the desire to know where he came from grew ever stronger.
I was consciously looking to solve the secrets that my mother and my stepfather and the older generation left me with. And I had questions about myself. So one day, when there was no one else in the house, I went and I opened the wardrobe and I looked at the strong box, and the key was on it. So I took it, unlocked it, looked in, found lots of papers, none about myself. None about myself, but I found a silver cup It gives the date of my first birthday, and then it says, from your godfather, H. Himmler. I knew the name Himmler, even at 15 and 16. And I knew the man was a criminal, one of the worst criminals in Germany. That indicated that my father must have been high up, somewhere, close to Himmler.
Himmler was godfather to at least 50 Lebensborn offspring, sired by his closest SS colleagues. He himself practiced what he preached, producing 2 illegitimate children of his own.
There was a shelf at the library with new acquisitions. I would go through all the books that came out about National Socialism. I was especially interested in looking at the photos. And I tried to determine whether there was any similarity between myself and people on those photos.
It wasn't until many years later that under pressure, Guntram's stepfather finally told him who his real father was. Ludolf von Alvensleben, a dedicated Nazi, a high-ranking SS officer, and Himmler's adjutant. In 1939, Alvensleben proved his loyalty to Hitler and the Nazi regime in the most brutal fashion. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland and started World War II. Hitler had ordered that Poland should be reduced to a slave nation. Its aristocracy, clergy, and intelligentsia were to be wiped out. During the invasion, Alvensleben led the Selbstschutz, a brutal paramilitary organization made up of Germans already living in Poland. Alvensleben told his men, "You are now the master race here. Don't be soft, be merciless. Clear out everything that is non-German."
I will never understand how they came to do the kinds of things they did. Convinced they would get away with it. They were even thinking they could rule the whole world. Convinced they would get territories for the master race, you know, which was to govern the world.
Guntram is heading to the War Crimes Office in Bydgoszcz, the town his father used as a Polish base. He and researcher Chris Janjowalski have been granted rare access to view criminal case files detailing Alvensleben's crimes. Death Valley, just outside the town, was the site of one of them.
Death Valley, or the Fordon Valley as it used to be known, was a desolate and secluded forest away from the city of Bydgoszcz, and the Germans were transporting their people, and they were digging ditches and then executing people there during the war. As you can see, this is case after case after case. Some of them are still open, still people seeking justice.
On one day, the 7th of October 1939, Alvensleben's men executed over 4,000 Poles who were piled into shallow graves and left to rot in Death Valley.
It does mention specific names of victims. Here it mentions Betty Israel, Betty Levine, in Fordon, then Fordon again, then fall down again. Always, and these killings always happened with the participation of the Selbstschutz.
And there are pictures of the victims, because there's a word zamordowanie, which is murdered, and there are their names. Franciszka Rulpińska, Aniela Rulpińska, the writer's sisters are related.
And you see photos of people and they were killed just for having a certain nationality. It's easy to put away written documents, but it's not easy to put away the photos and the pictures.
After the war, Guntram's father was captured by the Allies but escaped. Like many high-ranking Nazi war criminals, he fled to the safe haven of Latin America, living out his life as a free man in Argentina.
I remember seeing some of the statements that he made after the war when he was far away from Germany. And one of the statements was, oh, there was something right at the beginning of the war, but that wasn't much. 30,000 dead people in this area in 3 months. I don't know what to say to someone who makes that kind of statement. Oh, there was something at the beginning of the war, but that wasn't much.
Guntram's father's role in the racial cleansing of Poland was all part of a plan to accommodate the new master race, clearing Eastern Europe so that Lebensborn children, like his own son, could settle there in an expanded Reich. Himmler said, should we succeed in establishing this Nordic race, and from this seedbed produce a race of 200 million, then the world will belong to us. But fueling the empire's expansion by breeding was too slow a business for Himmler. So he turned to other means to expand the Lebensborn. He said, I intend to take German blood from wherever it is to be found and steal it wherever I can. As the war progressed, Himmler instructed Lebensborn operatives to go out and kidnap so-called Aryan children from their parents in the occupied Eastern Territories. Volker Heinecke only discovered years after the war that he had been abducted from the Ukraine and trafficked to Poland, where he was forced into the Lebensborn program.
Ist ein Rasseamt gewesen, auch von Himmler alles inszeniert. Da wurden die Kinder abgemessen. Also die Kopfform musste stimmen, die Seite, die Ohren, das musste alles ordentlich aussehen. Arisches Aussehen, blonde, blaue Augen. Sinn, wenn eine arische, also Elite nachkommt. Und das sollte alles so, war alles so geplant. Ne? Und Kinder sollten reine arische Kinder sein, möglichst nordische. Ne? Das hatte Heinrich Himmler alles so bestimmt. Da wollte ja wieder Kinder haben, die sich wieder gut vermehren und so weiter. Ne?
Children like Volker were Germanized and forbidden to speak their own language. By the end of the war, over 200,000 so-called Aryan children had been stolen from Poland and Russia alone. Building a numerically and physically superior master race was at the very core of Nazi ideology. Hitler had perverted Darwin's survival of the fittest to justify his notion that a strong race should prove its right to exist.
Unerbittliche Auslese. Der kranke Vogel fällt der Katze zum Opfer. Der schwächliche Hase wird vom Verfolger erwischt. Selbst unter gleichen Artgenossen finden Kämpfe statt, denen der Schlechtere zum Opfer fällt. Manche Vogelmutter merzt sogar rein instinktmäßig schlecht entwickelte Junge aus.
The idea was that there is a special race, the so-called Nordic race, blonde and blue-eyed people, and in a special hate are the more precious race. And they also have a good character. This crazy maniac idea was that the Aryan race should be, because they were so precious, should finally, well, reign the world one day. And this was the idea.
Und hinter uns kommt Deutschland!
Look at them closely. Look at them closely. Many of them are crazy. They happened to be able to be in power, and they assumed that it was their right to shape all of Germany in their own image.
This new world order had no space for flawed imperfection or genetic corruption. After all, why should the hard-working Germans be burdened by the impure?
In den letzten 70 Jahren hat sich unser Volk um 50% vermehrt, während die Zahl der Erbkranken im gleichen Zeitraum um 450% gestiegen ist. Wenn diese Entwicklung so weiterliefe, würde schon in 50 Jahren auf 4 gesunde Menschen ein Erbkranker kommen. Wir pflegen sie, aber wir verhindern ihre Vermehrung. Solche arme Wesen sollen in Zukunft nicht mehr neben unseren gesunden Kindern leben.
While the Nazi propaganda machine was spreading its hatred, Dorothea Buck was a school student living near the North German coast.
Wie deine Gesunde, die ich weiß nicht wie viel Behinderte tragen müssen. Und sie haben also das so grauslich dargestellt, dass die Bevölkerung eben auch dafür war. Nicht? Da haben sie grundsätzlich, einen Grundstock gelegt zur Abwertung aller behinderten Menschen.
Die Unfruchtbarmachung ist ein leichter chirurgischer Eingriff.
Hitler himself had always been a keen advocate of forced sterilization, arguing its case long before he came to power in 1933. Following a nervous breakdown in 1936, 19-year-old Dorothea discovered just how quickly Hitler's policy had become actual medical practice.
War meine Mutter vor die Wahl gestellt worden, entweder meiner Station zuzustimmen oder mich bis zum 45. Lebensjahr in der Anstalt zu lassen. Und da hat sie ganz erschrocken gesagt, das ist ja noch viel schlimmer. Und, aber das, nicht das, wie sollte man das, das konnte sie ja auch gar nicht verkraften. Und dann abends vorher wird man ja vorbereitet für die Operation. Und da fragte ich, wozu das wäre. Und da sagte die Diakonisse, für einen notwendigen kleinen Eingriff. Und dann erwachte ich dann wieder in einem kleinen Vierbettzimmer und dann hörte ich immer noch nicht, was gemacht worden war. Und dann hatte mir eine Mitpatientin, eine Diakonisse, erzählt, dass das eine Station gewesen sei. Und da war ich nun ganz total verzweifelt.
Dorothea was one of 350,000 forcibly sterilized because they were mentally ill, blind, or even just depressed. Master race logic soon dictated that sterilization would progress to extermination. In the autumn of 1939, while Hitler unleashed Nazi barbarity in Poland, at home in Germany, he also sanctioned a secret euthanasia program. Over the next 2 years, more than 70,000 genetic undesirables were murdered. Dozens at a time were crammed into small gas chambers. Their brains dissected on crude tables for genetic research.
If the Nazis would have known all the scientific results of genetics experiments, if they would have known what we know now, my God. I had times when I felt like shivering and, my God, well, we have to be very happy that they lost the war.
After Germany's defeat in 1945, the world began to see the full horrors of the Nazi regime. Millions had been systematically wiped out. The Nazi experiment lay in tatters, Germany shamed and in ruins. Although Hitler and Himmler had committed suicide, over the next 2 years, the Nuremberg trials put 200 of the surviving key architects of the regime to justice for their crimes.
This tribunal sentences you to 10 years imprisonment.
Lebensborn leaders escaped prosecution, claiming the program was merely a socially progressive network for orphans and illegitimate children. After Nuremberg, many Lebensborn mothers, still loyal to the Reich and hoping for a resurgence, continued lying to their children about their origins.
I felt it. I felt it that there's something, for me it was always, since I was a child, something was wrong with me. Which is definitely, my story is that I was born in a Lebensborn home in Oslo. My mother was employee of the Lebensborn, and she was still working in Oslo. Then she came back with this little baby to her sister and said, "Here, I brought you a little orphan from Norway, because didn't you always want a little girl?" So I was brought up in my very first 3 years. I thought my aunt was my mother and my cousins were my brothers.
After the war, Gisela's uncle, the man she thought to be her father, was freed by the Allies and returned home.
I was about 3 and a half. And then, of course, the boys who were some years older said, Papa is coming. So little Gysi also said, my Papa is coming back. And this guy said, what is this SS bastard doing here in my family? This was the shock of my small life, that I was a SS bastard. I didn't know the word, of course. And then, and he said, this is not my child, and I was lost.
When Gisela's real mother came forward, she was told yet another story about her daughter's origins.
They told me my father died in Russia, which was normal for my generation. I didn't have a picture from him. This was also not because other children whose parents, whose fathers had been killed in the war, they had pictures she didn't have. She said he was his fiancé. And of course, she hadn't had time before he had to go to the war. And of course, and when he would have come back, of course they would have married. So I stopped asking because I felt this is a wound in my mother.
After the war, the adults were obviously trying to stay out of politics. They refused to talk about the past. They did not praise Hitler. They did not praise National Socialism. But they defended many of the things that happened.
But as the years passed and orphans of the war came of age, countless stories emerged about the Nazi era. Gisela learnt more about Lebensborn from an article in the German press. It described the homes as anonymous breeding farms.
Oh my God, my father was like a stud who had to produce children. My mother was a whore. This was how I found out I was a Lebensborn child. There was an article in the newspaper and they wrote it like this, so this was horrible. I had to survive believing that I was the result of some stud and whore. And I didn't want to ask her. She also read this article. They were in a newspaper. She never said one word to it. So I said, well, if she doesn't talk about it, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. And I don't know, in these times, I really thought about suicide.
Eventually, her mother admitted the truth, that her daughter was the product of a casual liaison with a married SS officer. But Gisela's doubts persisted.
What did they want? Did they want me as a child? Or just did they want somebody as an ideological person for the system?
After Volker Heinecke had been kidnapped from the Ukraine and put into the Lebensborn program, he was eventually adopted by a wealthy shipping family from Hamburg. There he had a privileged upbringing with his adopted parents, until a chance encounter changed his world.
Ja, ein Paradies ist so und so. Ich habe das hier materiell, aber wir hatten ja auch immer beste Fahrzeuge, Autos, Gärtner und Putzfrauen, alles Mögliche. Das habe ich mit 7 Jahren von einem Nachbarkind mitgeteilt bekommen. Wir spielten hier am Teich und da sagte er zu mir plötzlich, du bist nicht das Kind deiner Eltern. Und das war für mich ein ganz harter Schlag. Ich habe das ja gehört, ich bin nicht das Kind meiner Eltern. Und dann bin ich mit dieser Wunde rumgelaufen. Das kann man gar keinem anderen Menschen so übermitteln, was da in einem vorgeht. Und hier ist es im Grunde alles künstlich gestellt, nicht?
Like all parents who adopted a Lebensborn child, Volker's mother and father maintained their vow of silence. Over the next few years, they brought him up as the heir to the family shipping business.
Aber ich habe nie mit meinen Eltern darüber geredet. Ich habe auch nie gefragt. Manchmal an persönlicher Zuwendung, nicht? Also das habe ich eigentlich auch vermisst. Das tut die Firma ja auch gar nicht. Wir haben uns hier am Esstisch mit meinen Adoptiveltern meistens über die Existenz von Rädern unterhalten, nicht? Der hat schon wieder nicht seine Bankverpflichtung bezahlen können und wir befrachten das Schiff und um Sachen, um Schiffe und Häuser, nicht? Das war ja mein Leben, nicht?
As the Lebensborn children grew up in the 50s and 60s, an optimistic Germany began to emerge from the rubble of war.
It was the time when rock and roll started. I was a passionate rock and roll dancer, so I think that lots of my vulneration and my angriness and everything, I could dance. Perhaps this saved me for a while.
While Gisela immersed herself in this new world, Guntram Weber, who by now knew that his father had been close to Himmler, continued to be dogged by questions about his past.
How would I have acted in a society that was akin to the one in the 30s and 40s in Germany? What would I have done? I posed that question to myself again and again. What would I have done? In hindsight, you can tell yourself, well, okay, I would have gone and I would have killed Hitler. But would you have done it under those circumstances? I wish I could tell myself that I would have rebelled against the system. I'm not sure I would have.
As the years went by, the Lebensborn children uncovered more and more of their parents' secrets. Gisela discovered that her mother, Emmy, had been a key Lebensborn operative working between Poland and Munich throughout the war. So crucial was her role, she had been called to testify at Nuremberg about the organization's kidnapping of children.
I read all her files, and of course she spoke very, very clever, like they all did. And of course she went to Poland to get some orphan children from there. And they were all claimed or being orphans, and you never know where they really came from. Children who were saved and brought into special homes where they had to forget their original language, where they had to learn German, and then Lebensborn organized the foster parents or the adopted parents.
It was only after his parents died that Volker felt able to explore his past. He discovered that he himself had been used as a case study of child abduction at the Nuremberg trials.
Ich lief um das Haus herum. In Alnova ist mein Geburtsort. Und da kam die SS mit ihren Jeeps vorbei und sahen mich, blondes, blauäugiges Kind, also richtig extrem blond, blauäugig, arisch, und sie haben mich weggeholt vom Haus. Nachher beim dritten Mal stieß dann der SS-Mann mit dem Fuß meine Mutter so weg und hat mich dann so angerissen, noch an einem Arm hochgehalten und dann weggenommen und aufs Auto raufgeladen. Dann war das okay. Dann kriegte man eine Geburtsurkunde, künstlich, von Lebensborn.
I really confronted her with her own words from Nuremberg. And so then she remembered something. But still she said, well, I said, you must have asked yourself why you went to Poland and you took some, and you got some children you had to bring to Germany. Where did they come from? Well, they were orphans. I said, you can't imagine this. I know they were robbed. We don't know anything. We didn't know, and I don't know, and I didn't know then, and I don't know today. They were orphans, point. And I said, well, you know, you mustn't have known that you must have seen that those children you got from there were only blonde and blue-eyed children. Then she said, well, we didn't take everything. That's what she really said. And this was like, I broke, I collapsed crying, because then all of a sudden in this sentence I heard everything. When she said, of course, we did not take everything.
Alles, was da ist alles falsch, die ganzen Dokumente. Geburtsurkunde, Geburtsort, Geburtsdatum. Ich weiß auch nicht, am 17. Oktober ist ja auch nicht richtig. Ne? Zwangsweise in diese ganze Geschichte reingekommen. Ne? Ich bin zwangsweise deutsch geworden. Wo sind meine Wurzeln? Wo komme ich her? Wer waren meine Eltern? Wer war mein Vater? Meine Mutter.
Und was würden Sie sagen zu Ihrer Mutter, falls Sie noch
Ja, wenn ich sie finde, sie wird auch eine andere Sprache vielleicht sprechen, nicht? Ukrainisch. Ja. Das kann man nicht beschreiben, nicht? Da werden Bäche fließen, nicht? Wein, Wein, Wein und auch glücklich sein, nicht? Endlich am Ziel zu sein, nicht?
Well, the whole issue is a question of identity. All of us, we don't have a real identity, and we lost it the more we knew. Everybody says they always had the feeling like the ground is shivering. You never feel like you stand, what we also in psychology say, you need grounding to be a person in this world. We didn't get a real grounding in the first years. Then we found out something is wrong. Then we found out the historical context, so it gets worse and worse.
Guntram Weber's mother died before he could discover the truth about his past. Over time, the legacy of lies, combined with the fractured sense of his father's role in Nazi Germany, resulted in a near breakdown.
I did not know where to turn. I did not have an idea of what to do. I think deep down I was afraid of knowing about the dark secrets which I assumed were there. But at the same time, I realized that I had to do something.
Over the past 6 years, in a bid to shed more light on his Lebensborn past, Guntram has been trying to form a complete picture of the man he never met, but has shaped his life, his father, SS General Ludolf von Alvensleben.
I want to find some way of taking control of my own situation. Yeah. They refused that. My mother refused it when she refused me information about my father, about my early months. And I want it. I want some control over my own life.
Guntram's journey to Poland is his attempt to come face to face with the atrocities his father committed against the Polish people during and after the German invasion of 1939. At the War Museum in Bydgoszcz, Guntram discovers letters from German soldiers describing their involvement in the ethnic cleansing.
It's called document number 27. It must be from 1939. It's for Kreisleiter Kampe, who was in charge of this area. We want to add that the high moral power of resistance we have found among Polish people arises, among other things, arises from the fact that when they are being liquidated, they mostly show a fearless, courageous behavior. I can't stand this. I don't know, there's no word about humans, or they're just being praised for their courage. This is beyond my scale of comprehension. This father of mine, he ordered those things. He ordered those executions.
In the massacres of 1939, around 60,000 people, the elite of Polish society, were culled to pave the way for the Lebensborn generation. Lebensborn was about giving birth to a master race. Its mirror image, the death camps and genocide of the Jewish race and millions of others who would be exterminated.
I think I will never get something like understanding or whatever. It's just horror. It's just horror, and the horror goes on. And in those nights I don't sleep. I still have nightmares. In my consciousness, it's always I am the other part of those people who had to die. It's no wonder you feel guilty if you're part of this other side. And it doesn't help too much to know it's not your fault. Because many people say, why do you feel guilty? It was not you, it was your parents. Still, they were my parents. And I can only say that I think it's very important that we don't go into the same habit like our parents go into the silence and not talking about it.
Gisela's mother continued to maintain her own silence. She talked little about what she had done, refusing to confront her past.
She was 89, almost 90, and she was sick and no specific. She was old and she didn't want to live anymore. She said, I want to die, and why can't I die? And she had horror nightmares. She told me some of her nightmares, and I said, Mama, there must be something you're carrying with you. Why don't you tell me? I really said it in my very soft manner, and I said, I think there is something burdening your soul, and perhaps you can deliver it if you. And she said, no, there's nothing.
Guntram Weber's parents both died before he could learn the truth of his origins. So his journey to Poland is to confront not his father, but his father's crimes. Among those massacred on his father's orders was school headmaster Zygmunt Polakowski. His 91-year-old daughter, Jadwiga, still lives in Bydgoszcz.
Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry, Madame Polakowska. Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry. Do you speak a little bit English?
A little, only a little.
A little.
Only a little.
I want to say something on my own. I am sorry.
Thank you. Enter, please.
No, thank you.
It is my father. Killed.
I saw his photo. His photo.
It is my father, killed in honor of your father.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Żeby wszystko było jasne. Ojciec mój został aresztowany 16 października. Przyjechało znowu gestapo po te czarne mundury i przyzwoity taki samochód, którego oni używali. My byliśmy wszyscy tacy godni. Obyło się bez łez. Matka moja jak słup soli stała. Mnie było trochę trudniej, bo ja byłam ukochaną córką mojego ojca i też go tak strasznie kochałam. Szalenie ścisłe więzy między nami, ale postanowiłam być dzielna Polka i nie pokazać swojej rozpaczy. Mój ojciec zdjął z palca obrączkę ślubną, dał mojej mamie tę obrączkę, liczył się z tym, że będzie zamordowany. My stałyśmy z mamą w oknie, jak ojca sprowadzili na dół do samochodu i jeszcze pozwolili ojcu spojrzeć do góry i zdjął kapelusz i jeszcze z nami się tak pożegnał na odległość. Więc nie tam jakąś taką budą więzienną czy coś, tylko chociaż przyzwoitym samochodem go zabrali.
How old were you?
Wtedy miałam 20 years. 20 years. And all my life happy life was crushed.
Yeah.
Crushed.
Guilty. This is really the one word is you feel guilty if you know that you were taken into this horror scene from the very beginning of your life. It goes on in what is in my genes when my father was a Nazi criminal. it's a whole human issue with shadows in everybody, and which circumstances do allow people to live more like their shadows.
In recent years, Gisela has shared her experience as a creation of the Third Reich by giving talks to the German public in an attempt to confront them with the truth.
I managed, almost, not quite, but managed to transfer my feeling of guilt and shame into the responsibility to talk about it, and especially to talk about it with young people.
But for Gisela's mother, it was only on her deathbed that she betrayed any recognition that the truth needed to be told.
I really spent the last nights with her in the hospital, and she died in my arms. It was not easy, but in former times I almost had a personal resistance. I didn't want to be touched from her, and this was, and in the end I could stroke her, and well, and she said one of the, and this I had also respect, because one of her last sentences was, she, in the night before she died, she woke up for a minute, and before she always talked like I couldn't understand her. And then she said, "It is good you brought the truth on the table. And it's good we made the peace between us." And this were her last sentences, so it was kind of good. It's okay, Mama. I at least was lucky to talk to my mother, which many of other Lebensborn children could not. I got at least some answers.
Death Valley lies just beyond the outskirts of Big Gorsch. It is a permanent memorial to those murdered on the orders of Guntram Weber's father, Ludolf von Alvensleben. Jadwiga Polakowska has asked to be taken there, to tell Guntram about the day she made a terrible discovery, 6 years after the Germans arrested her father.
To chciałam. Tylko że wtedy miałam 26 lat. Tutaj gdzieś stałam. Jeńcy, długi odcinek rowu. I wyobraźcie sobie, że z niemiecką dokładnością byli rozstrzeliwani, bo odkryły się z ziemi czaszki tych wszystkich poprzedników. To były dosłownie, Krzysztof, jak paciorki w różańców, tak dokładnie te odległości, rozumiesz? Ręce, nogi, czaszka, tylko w glinie takiej zamazane to wszystko, ale to wszystko się trzymało całości. I w tym momencie odkryło się ciało, które było pod tym akurat odwróconym. I ja od razu wiedziałam, że to jest mój ojciec. Jeszcze mu tym opowiadaniem rozraniłam.
Oh yeah, they went straight to my heart. And
But it is true, it is true. W opowiadaniu ja nic nie skłamałam, wszystko tak jak było.
Story.
Wszystko tak opowiedziałam, jak było.
I told you the way it was.
Tak.
yeah,
Nie jest, it's not your fault. You have only trouble, and me too. Pojednanie po polsku, pojednanie. Kolegów, nawet księdza pocieszał, oczekując na tę śmierć. A on nie może się pochwalić dobrym ojcem, to też jest smutne.
Following the Third Reich's defeat, the Lebensborn experiment ended in failure, consigned to history as the Nazis' perversion of science and medicine. These children's destiny was to be part of a master race that would rule for 1,000 years. But they did not grow up to be the blonde-haired, blue-eyed puppets that Himmler had envisaged.
our parents have been brainwashed enough. After the war, they could say, well, we couldn't change it, and it was like it was. But for us, it was like, yeah, we didn't get a brainwashed gene somehow. It was like we really got on just the opposite. We got the kind of guilt. Of all the former Lebensborn kids I know, there is nobody who says, well, wasn't it good? Look at me, I'm a very good-looking Aryan type. Wasn't it somehow also good? I don't know anybody.
For Volker Heinecke, the Germanization program he was forced through failed to erase his pre-Lebensborn past. He has never given up his dream that his true blood relations are alive, somewhere.
Kraft ja draus gewinnt. Wenn man also Wurzeln hat, dann hat man auch Kraft, nicht? Aber wenn man so fremd reingesetzt wird, es ist auch immer so, ich lerne immer neue Leute kennen und ich suche wahrscheinlich immer irgendeinen Verwandten, in irgendeinem. Ich glaube auch, dass ich Geschwister habe. Also auch wenn ich nach Kiew fliege und ich fahre dann mit der Bahn auf die Krim, ich muss die ganze Nacht Gardinen immer rausgucken. Das ist so, das kann man gar keinem anderen Menschen so übermitteln, was da in einem vorgeht. Das ist eine ganz andere Welt, ein ganz anderes Leben und ich bin da eigentlich geboren und gehöre dahin und bin hier nach. Und das würde ich bei meinen echten Eltern, wenn ich die Nummer sehe und wenn sie auch schon tot sind am Grab, also das wäre nicht auszudenken, es wäre unbeschreiblich, was sich dann abspielen würde. Nicht? Also ein Gefühl vielleicht auch. Nicht?
Like Gisela and Volker, Guntram Weber has rejected all that Lebensborn stood for. He is now using his experiences in Poland to atone for the crimes of his father. He is establishing writing workshops to help enable the people of Bydgoszcz to come to terms with the wounds inflicted by the Nazis. Gisela Heidenreich has written a book of her experiences as a child of the Nazis and is continuing to lecture worldwide on the evils of the regime.
You can watch any of the episodes from this series on the last Nazis on the BBC iPlayer.